Let's turn to Chris Garcia. He's a former deputy director of the U.S. Department of Commerce for the Trump administration. Chris, nice to have you with us. And Chris, Beijing.
Great to see you.
Nice to have you. Beijing responding through state media, saying that the nation is ready to endure the economic fallout and that China is prepared for a protracted war and it doesn't fear sacrificing short-term economic interests. What do you make of that?
I think this is just a bad decision by China. I mean, really right now, their economy is suffering at such a rate, and with the U.S. economy improving at such a rate, with the United States being in a position of strength, China being in a position of weakness, even though you have a president who's going to be president for life in President Xi, I think this is to his demise. Frankly, I think it's to the Chinese economy's demise. Certainly consumers in China are not going to appreciate the continued downward spiral of its economy, of its currency. And I think with the position of strength that the United States is in, we're willing to ride this out as well. The United States has lived through the Great Depression. We've lived through the Great Recession. We're stronger still today. And I think that what you'll find is more resilience from the United States and more steadfastness by the Trump administration in pursuing this tactic.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to such adverse economic turnarounds for the U.S.
Of course not. Of course not.
And now, Chris, it's interesting because some would say that the media in China is trying to project a message of confidence to Chinese investors. We know that the president tends to look at U.S. stock markets as a policy gauge, if you will. And as we mentioned before, China's stock market is taking a big hit. The Shanghai index down 18% year to date. Now, keeping in mind, Chris, that most of the investors in the Chinese market are retail investors. They're mom and pop investors. You don't have these big bank money managers that are the majority of investors in the market. Do you see that having an impact on how Beijing views this?
Of course. Well, if your consumer base is making up if your retail investors are making up a significant portion of your markets, of course, any type of trade restrictions, any type of tariffs that are imposed, any type of benign as benign as it might be, trade war that you have with the United States, you're not going to end up winning. And your consumers are going to end up, frankly, suffering to the point where that does affect the markets significantly. Also, what they're going to try to do with Iran. Of course, you saw the sanctions that were imposed today that were resumed. China is going to continue buying oil from Iran, but I think what you're going to see is, the United States again being in a position of strength, and take a look at the big picture, take a look at the whole story that President Trump's been able to do with domestic success.
Chris, I'm glad you brought up the Iran angle because it does play into the big picture, and all of these issues are related. Do you see China and perhaps some of the other countries that could be on the receiving end of the president trying to rebalance the trade playing field, using the sanctions against Iran as leverage, saying, all right, we'll play along, we'll cooperate with the U.S. agenda on this one, but cut us some slack on tariffs, for example. Do you see those coming into the conversation in a combined manner?
Absolutely. I mean, take a look again at the full picture. The full picture after achieving such significant domestic success in the United States, the president is now in a position of strength to realign our relationships with our allies and some of our adversaries as well, as you've seen with North Korea and Russia. But what I think with regard to China, the reason that President Trump brought the European Union to the table with the threat of sanctions, with the threat of tariffs, not sanctions, you look at now the moving forward in unison with the EU, with Australia, Japan, Mexico. We're seeing the NAFTA deal, or at least with Mexico wrapping up very shortly, possibly with Canada. This is all part of a big picture strategy to build alliances so that when we do take a unilateral action, such as withdrawing from the JCPOA, the Iran deal, we look to ratchet up sanctions again against Iran because, again, the JCPOA, according to the Trump administration, and in fact it was a flawed deal. Now that we have allies to help back us up, we're going to have a much greater position of strength to be able to achieve the foreign policy objectives with the Iranian regime.
Those
and I think,
allies,
frankly, that's going to be a great thing for Israel.
Chris, so far those allies not backing the U.S. up, but we'll see how it plays out, as we said, with the sanctions and trade conversation. Chris, appreciate it. Chris Garcia, thank you.